I would like to welcome you to our first ever Copic Mondays live from our craft room. As you can see, Haley's always here as my assistant, so she'll be helping me with this video. Well, today we are going to be talking about the Copic airbrush system. Welcome to the first ever video edition of Copic Mondays. I hope you guys will bear with me. I have never done this before and I'm super nervous, but we're going to try it. What I'm going to introduce you today is the Copic airbrush system. This is the ABS-1. It's carried at Cutter's Creek. It's what is recommended for beginners to start out with airbrushing with your Copic markers. What you receive is you get your airbrush grip. You also get the air adapter. You get the air hose that connects the air grip to the air can. You get a can of compressed air. Once these run out, you can buy extras. They give you about 8 to 12 minutes of airbrushing. You also get this little foam piece. This isn't packing, this is actually your air can holder. It keeps your air can from flopping around while you're airbrushing, because otherwise it's hard to hold when you have everything all hooked up and you're working on a project. It holds it nice and steady on your desk, and it also helps to regulate the temperature of the can, because when you're working with compressed air, sometimes it can get really cold and freeze up in the can, and this helps to regulate the temperature. If you really get into airbrushing, which I have, and you enjoy it a lot, you may want to think about getting the Copic air compressor. You can use the Copic air compressor. You want to set your settings between 20 and 50 psi. Anything higher than 50 psi runs a risk of damaging your air grip tool. So you need to be really careful if you're not getting the Copic air compressor that you make sure your air compressor meets with those standards. But we recommend, of course, that you get the Copic airbrush system. It's very quiet, easily fits on your desk. It's nice and small, and you can see it has the air regulator, it has the air gauge here, and then this little guy is so you can adjust your air pressure, and then this takes the moisture out of the air. So like if it's freezing up in the tank like it would in the can of air, this takes that moisture out so that you don't get those drops of moisture on your project. So why would you want to use airbrush? Well, the nice thing about Copic airbrush is its changing colors is as easy as uncapping and recapping a marker. A typical airbrush system, you would have to mix up ink or paint into a little paint pot, and you would have to change each one of those and clean out your nozzle in between applications. With the Copic airbrush system, all you need to do is uncap your sketch or your original marker, take it and you slide it into your air grip until you hear that snap. When it snaps into place, you see that it forms a complete line here, and that means that your marker is perfectly in place and ready to airbrush. One of the common questions is, oh my gosh, if I'm going to be airbrushing with my markers, isn't that going to use a lot of ink? Actually, airbrushing uses less ink than it does when you color, because with airbrushing you're just putting a light color across your project. You're not saturating the paper like you are when you're actually coloring an image. So it does use a lot less ink than coloring your project. This is great for, you can mask off when you color an image, you can mask it off and then airbrush the background, so you use a lot less ink that way. Some of the great things that you can do with this is you can airbrush almost anything. You can do paper, you can do acrylic. It dries very quickly because they're alcohol markers. As soon as the alcohol is evaporated, it's dry and it's not sticky to the touch. So also if you're working with acrylic or you're working on transparency, and say you airbrush it and you didn't like how it turned out, you can take an alcohol wipe and wipe it off, so you can have some do-overs when you're working on projects like that. Now let me show you a few things that you can airbrush with your Copic airbrush system. When I took my airbrush class for certification, we went through airbrushing, and this is one of the images that we completed in the class. We stamped a basic image on our Bazil or Prism cardstock using our Memento ink, and then what we did was we took just little strips of paper and we tore them to make like a sandy beach, so it kind of lines up, as you can see with our stamped image, just tearing a little bit of paper to match up. What we did is we went ahead and we flipped it over like this, and covered up our page using Post-it notes. And then we went ahead and airbrushed our sandy beach. The closer that you get, and as you learn and you're working with your airbrushing, you'll find doing different pressure, closer, farther away, is how much speckle or how smooth that you get in your coverage. The harder that you press on your nozzle, the more ink that you're going to push through, the lighter your image is going to be. Please excuse my puppies that are playing in the background. Then we turned around and just flipped it the other way to cover up the sand, and did the same thing using the blue and the purple and the orange to make the sunset. Now, one of the things I thought was really neat about having the airbrush system is how many times do we go and do a project and we don't have something that matches what we're working on. So for an example, I colored this image the other day and I was making this slider card. And say when I was working on it, I get all done, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just really don't have the ribbon or the button I wanted to match. I really want something that matches her hat and her little heart on her boots, but I just don't have anything that color. Well, what you can do is, if you have your airbrush system, you can take your Copic marker that you used to color that point on your image, snap it into your airbrush system, and now I need to turn on my compressor, which I forgot to do before I started recording. Sorry, you're going to see a big old shadow go across there. That's me. You just turn on your system, and what I did here to get prepared for airbrushing this for you guys so that you could see was I just put a little bit of adhesive down and put a plain white ribbon on my paper, and then I can take, if I want it really light, I can go higher. If I want it darker, I can go closer and spray darker until I get my ribbon in the color that I wanted for my project. Now I can do the same thing with a button. Say I needed a button to match, I can just do the same thing and quickly spray my button to match. Or a flower. If I wanted a flower to match, I can do it really lightly, go from far away and lightly spray my flower, or I can get really close and make it really dark, and then I have one that matches my image. You can also airbrush on metal. This is just a little metal tag that I had in my scrap stuff. So I'm going to take a little bit of adhesive. This is just a scrap piece of paper. Just put a little bit of adhesive down, put down my little metal piece, and then take and I can airbrush over and turn it red. So I've got that red and that silver metallic there, and it completely matches my project. Hope you can see that with the camera. And for doing this, when you're working with your airbrushing, and what I have done here to cover up my area so I don't ruin my my mat, is I just put down some newspaper, and then these are just old scrap sheets from when I printed something on the printer and it didn't turn out well, so I use those just for my backgrounds. But as you can see, anything that you have around the house that's a light color or it's the wrong color, you can take your airbrush system and, as quick as unhooking your cap, you have got the color that you need to airbrush with. Now, there's all kinds of things that you can airbrush. I mean, it's just not limited to your scrapbooking. We have Halloween coming up, so your kids want to do their costume and they want their hair some wild and crazy color. You can actually airbrush their hair, and then when they get done, you can just wash it out with shampoo and it'll just come right out. It won't hurt them. It's non-toxic. Again, if you get it on something that you don't want it on, you can just use a little bit of alcohol and take it off. Say I wanted to airbrush my fingernails and I wanted to do them purple. I could airbrush them purple, and when I get home and I'm all done and I don't want that anymore, just take some alcohol and rub it over and take it right off, and then your fingernails are back to what they were before you started. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation about the Copic airbrush system. We'll be doing some specific projects in the future using the system so that you can see how versatile it is. But again, Cutter's Creek carries the ABS-1, which is your starter kit, and you can start out with your can of air. That gives you a great place to start. You have 8 to 12 minutes of airbrushing, which really, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a long time. It's perfect for taking with you to the crop or anywhere that you want to go, and you can airbrush and color with your Copics. So we'll see you next time on Copic Mondays. Thanks for joining us.